Okay, wow. So get this right. President-elect Trump just nominated Matt Gaetz for Attorney General. Oh, yeah. The Florida congressman. And people have a lot to say about it. It seems like even some people in Trump's own party are kind of like, what is going on here? So we're going to,
Yeah.
dive into all this, figure out who Gaetz is and what this means and
Yeah.
what it could mean for the Department of Justice.
Yeah, Matt Gaetz, he's really not your typical attorney general nominee. You're right. He's been a Florida representative for 4 terms now, and he's famous, I guess you could say, for being very loyal to Trump and also for being very aggressive. He's really made a name for himself going after both Democrats and Republicans, and really kind of shaking things up, making a lot of enemies along the way.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we all remember January 6th. And his role in that and how he challenged the 2020 election results. That was all over the news for weeks.
Mm-hmm.
But Attorney General, it seems like Trump usually goes for people with more, maybe we could say, experience for this kind of job.
Exactly. In his first term, Trump appointed Jeff Sessions, William Barr, and Rod Rosenstein to Attorney General. And all 3 of those guys, they had tons of experience in law enforcement. They're, considered really established figures. But Gaetz, this is totally different. A lot of people are really confused.
Yeah, especially since Gaetz doesn't have any prosecutorial experience, right? I mean, the Attorney General is in charge of the whole Justice Department.
Which is huge.
Right, they're responsible for enforcing all the federal laws.
Yeah.
So it's not like you usually give that job to somebody who's, better known for political stunts than actual legal expertise.
Right. So it makes you wonder, what is Trump really trying to do here? Is he saying that he wants a Justice Department that's more about politics, one that maybe will put his own agenda ahead of, the normal legal processes? That's something a lot of legal experts and politicians are worried about. And it's not hard to see why.
No, I mean, you've got to admit, Gaetz has a history of pushing the limits. And then there are all those investigations about, these sex trafficking and misconduct allegations, which he denies, but it just adds, another layer to all of this.
Yeah, definitely. And those allegations are going to be a big deal during the confirmation process. Even if Gaetz is innocent, just the fact that these allegations exist, it's going to make it really hard for him to, get people to trust him, especially people who already have doubts about him,
Yeah. It's interesting that Trump didn't go with someone like Senator Mike Lee or Jay Clayton. They were both seen as top contenders. They seem like safer choices, more traditional. This Gaetz thing feels like he's trying to, stir things up.
Yeah, it definitely feels that way. He's saying, I don't care about the usual rules. I'm going to do things my way. And he's choosing loyalty over experience, even if it means making a lot of people in the legal community mad.
And the reactions have been pretty intense. I've seen people call Gaetz unfit, incompetent, even a reckless pick. They're worried that he'll put Trump's agenda first, ahead of actually upholding the law, that he might use the Justice Department to go after his enemies.
Right. That's definitely a big fear right now. And it's not crazy to think that way. The Attorney General has so much power, They decide who gets investigated, who gets prosecuted, and they can even change the legal landscape with their policies. So putting someone like Gaetz in charge, someone who's shown that he's willing to bend the rules, it's a big risk.
And even some Republicans are pushing back, like Congressman Max Miller. He said Gaetz has a 0% shot at getting confirmed by the Senate. Called him a reckless pick.
Yeah.
Which is a pretty strong statement, coming from another Republican.
Yeah, it really is. And it shows how hard it's going to be for Gaetz to get confirmed. He's going to face opposition from Democrats, but also from some Republicans. And then, of course, there are the investigations and people questioning his judgment and whether he's really fit for this kind of job.
Right. So what do you think? Is he actually going to get confirmed? Is this just a political stunt? Or does Trump really believe that Gaetz can be Attorney General?
It's hard to say. It depends on a lot of things, like the political climate, who's in the Senate, and how strong the opposition to Gaetz is. I mean, there's a chance he could get through, but it's going to be really tough.
And even if he does, can he actually lead the Justice Department with all this baggage?
Yeah.
I mean, how can people respect him when so many people in the legal world, don't trust him?
That's a good point. If he becomes Attorney General, he's going to have to work on that. He'll have to build relationships and show that he can be fair and impartial no matter what his personal beliefs are or his political affiliations.
Right. So, okay, what about Trump's reasoning for choosing Gaetz? What's the official explanation?
Well, Trump says that Gaetz is, quote, a deeply gifted and tenacious attorney who will root out the systemic corruption at DOJ and, quote, Return the department to its true mission of fighting crime and upholding our democracy and constitution.
Okay, wow. Kind of ironic, don't you think? Considering, some of the things Gaetz has done and the allegations against him, makes you wonder if reading out corruption is really what this is all about.
Yeah, it does. That's the question, isn't it? Does Gaetz's record actually show that he cares about fighting corruption? Or is there something else going on here?
All right, so let's dig into that. What does Gaetz's record actually tell us?
Well, for one thing, Gaetz has supported some policies that are, well, kind of unusual, For someone who wants to be the top law enforcement officer in the country, like, he's said that marijuana should be decriminalized and that Edward Snowden should be pardoned. And he even wants to limit the FBI's power to wiretap people, which they say is crucial for stopping terrorism.
Oh, wow, that's pretty different.
Hmm.
Definitely seems like he likes to challenge the status quo. But how would that actually work if he became Attorney General? How would those ideas become policy?
Yeah, that's where things get really interesting, and we'll talk more about that after a quick break.
All right, we'll be right back to get into Gaetz's policy positions and what they could mean for the Justice Department. Don't go anywhere.
Yeah, before the break, we were talking about Gaetz and his policies. And you're right, they're definitely not what you'd normally expect, especially for someone who might actually end up running the Justice Department.
I know, it's like, whoa, what would that even look like? Take the marijuana thing, decriminalizing it at the federal level. That's a huge shift.
Right. I mean, for decades, the Justice Department has been all about the war on drugs. So this would be like a total change. It could have massive consequences.
Yeah.
Like, think about it. If marijuana is decriminalized, how does that change how the Justice Department does its job?
Right.
How do they decide what cases to focus on?
Exactly.
What about all the people who've been convicted of marijuana offenses?
Yeah. What happens to them?
Do they get pardoned?
Yeah.
And what about the states that have already legalized marijuana?
Oh, yeah. What happens to them?
It's a lot to think about.
It really is.
And it just shows how much power the Attorney General has. Their decisions can really affect the whole legal system.
Right.
Not just how laws are enforced, but also how people think about those laws.
And then there's the Snowden thing. Pardoning him. I mean, that would be
Oh, yeah, huge.
a total bombshell.
People have such strong opinions about Snowden.
Right.
Is he a traitor? Or a whistleblower?
Yeah. It's hard to know what to think.
Well, Gaetz supporting Snowden, it suggests that he might care more about individual rights than, national security.
I mean, it's a tough balance, right? You want to keep the country safe, but you also don't want the government spying on everyone.
Exactly.
So where does Gaetz draw the line?
That's what everyone's going to want to know.
Yeah.
Especially during the confirmation hearings.
Right.
I mean, if he's willing to pardon Snowden,
Yeah.
it might mean that he's also willing to challenge the intelligence agencies and push for more transparency.
Right. Be sure they're not overstepping.
Exactly.
And then there's his idea of restricting the FBI's wiretapping authority.
Ooh, right.
That's another big one. The FBI says they need it to stop terrorism and stuff, but Gaetz sees it as an invasion of privacy.
Yeah, he's not afraid to go up against powerful institutions. He's definitely got that libertarian streak,
Limited government and
Exactly.
individual freedom.
He seems really wary of the government having too much power, especially when it comes to surveillance.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
which is interesting, considering he might end up being in charge of the agency that does a lot of that surveillance.
I know, right?
So if he becomes Attorney General,
Mm-hmm.
could that actually change how the FBI operates? Could he actually rein them in?
It's possible.
Yeah.
The Attorney General has a lot of influence over the FBI.
Right.
They decide what the FBI should focus on. They control the budget. So if Gaetz is serious about limiting surveillance,
Yeah.
he could actually make some changes.
It's pretty wild to think about. And it's not just about his policies, right? There's also the whole question of his personality and his judgment. I mean, this is the guy who tried to overturn the 2020 election results.
Yeah, that's hard to ignore.
It makes you wonder if he really respects the law, if he really believes in democracy.
I mean, his involvement in January 6th, it shows that he's willing to push things really far, even if it means breaking the rules.
Right. And that's what scares people. They think he's unpredictable,
Yeah.
that he might not actually care about being fair and impartial.
They worry that he'll use the Justice Department for his own personal vendettas. Or to help his friends.
Yeah. It's like he's a loose cannon.
That's the fear.
It all feels like it's part of this bigger trend, the politicization of the Justice Department.
Right. It's supposed to be independent,
Yeah.
above politics. But lately, that hasn't always been the case.
Especially during the Trump administration.
Right.
And if Gaetz becomes Attorney General, it's hard to imagine that changing.
That's the worry.
Yeah, it's kind of terrifying, honestly. The Justice Department is supposed to be like the foundation of our democracy.
It's supposed to protect our rights,
Right.
make sure everyone is treated fairly under the law.
Exactly.
But if it just becomes another political weapon, that's a really dangerous path.
This whole thing is just like, it's a huge deal.
It really is.
And the reactions have been so intense.
People are paying attention.
Yeah, because it matters.
It matters a lot.
This feels like a turning point.
A crossroads.
Yeah, like the choices we make now could have huge consequences.
For the Justice Department. For our political system.
Yeah.
For all of us.
So what do you think? Where do we go from here?
That's the big question, isn't it? This nomination has really brought some important issues to the surface. Like how strong are our institutions?
Yeah.
Can they withstand this kind of pressure?
Right.
Are we, as a society, committed to the rule of law?
It feels like a test.
It is.
And what about Trump? What does he do next?
If Gaetz is rejected,
Yeah, does he double down?
does he pick someone even more extreme?
Or does he back down?
Does he choose someone more traditional?
Yeah, someone who actually has experience and seems like they'd be a good attorney general.
It's hard to say, but one thing's for sure, this story is not over yet.
All right, well, we've covered a lot of ground here. This nomination has really stirred things up.
It's a big deal.
So, as we wrap things up, what are some of the key takeaways?
Well, we've learned that Matt Gaetz is a very controversial figure. He's extremely loyal to Trump, and he's not afraid to break the rules.
Yeah.
His nomination has really divided people. Some people think he'd be a disaster as Attorney General.
Right. They're worried about his qualifications, his temperament,
Yeah.
and whether he would use the Justice Department for his own purposes.
Exactly.
And then we talked about his policies.
Yeah, like decriminalizing marijuana, pardoning Snowden, limiting the FBI's surveillance powers.
Those are some pretty big changes.
They are.
And we also heard from people who have worked with both Trump and Gaetz.
Right. They gave us some interesting insights.
Yeah, it's helpful to hear from people who are actually there.
Definitely.
So now we wait for the Senate hearings. They're going to be intense.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to be really interesting to see how it all plays out.
Will Gaetz be able to convince enough people that he's the right person for the job?
Right.
Or will he crash and burn?
Only time will tell.
Exactly.
But one thing's clear. This is a huge moment.
It could really change the future of the Justice Department.
And the future of our country.
So stay tuned.
And this story is far from over. So these firsthand accounts, from people who worked in the Trump administration, what are they saying about Gaetz and Trump?
Well, some of what they're saying is pretty interesting. Like Mark Short, Pence's former chief of staff, he didn't hold back at all. He said, nominating someone who's known for sex trafficking for the top law enforcement job is usually not a good idea.
Wow. Straight to the point.
Yeah. And then there's this former DOJ official from the Trump administration who wanted to stay anonymous. They called Gaetz's nomination fucking appalling.
Wow.
Yeah. And they said that the attorney general shouldn't be someone who likes to stir up trouble. And that Gaetz seems to enjoy chaos too much.
That's that's not good.
No, it's not. It really makes you think that maybe Gaetz is more interested in, causing problems.
Yeah.
And getting what he wants than actually doing what's right.
Right. It's not about justice. It's about him.
Exactly.
So do you think, with all this, do you think any Republicans in the Senate might actually vote against him?
It's possible. I've heard that some of them are worried about Gaetz. They don't think he's right for the job.
Yeah.
So maybe they'll put their country first and vote against him, especially if their constituents are pressuring them, or if they think that confirming Gaetz would just destroy the Justice Department,
No. Yeah. It feels like this whole thing is really a test of Trump's power.
It is.
If he can get Gaetz confirmed,
right,
it would be like he's saying, I can still do whatever I want.
Exactly.
But it would also, it would hurt people's trust in the Justice Department.
Absolutely. It would send the message that it's okay to put politics above everything else.
Right. Qualifications don't matter.
Loyalty is all that matters.
It's scary. So what if Gaetz doesn't get confirmed? What do you think Trump will do?
I don't know.
Will he try to nominate someone even more extreme?
Maybe.
Or will he finally pick someone who
actually has the right experience?
Yeah, someone who seems like they'd be a good attorney general, someone who actually cares about the law.
It's impossible to know what Trump will do.
Yeah.
But this whole thing has really shown us how divided our country is and how fragile our institutions are.
Right. It's a wake-up call.
It is.
Okay, well, we've covered a lot today. This Gaetz nomination it's a big deal.
It is.
So as we wrap up, What are the main things we should remember?
Well, Matt Gaetz is a controversial figure. He's very loyal to Trump, and he's willing to push the boundaries. His nomination for Attorney General has caused a lot of debate. People are worried about his qualifications, his temperament, and whether he would use the Justice Department for political reasons.
Yeah, it's a lot to be concerned about.
We've also talked about his policy positions, some of which are very different from what we're used to. And we've heard from people who have worked with both Trump and Gaetz. They've given us some valuable insights.
Yeah, it's important to hear those perspectives.
Now we wait for the Senate hearings. They're going to be very important. They will help us to understand whether Gaetz has any chance of actually becoming Attorney General.
It's going to be fascinating to watch.
It is.
And whatever happens, this whole situation has really highlighted
How important the Justice Department is and how crucial it is for it to be independent and impartial.
it's the foundation of our legal system.
Exactly.
So thank you for joining us for this deep dive. It's been a wild one.
It has.
We'll be back next time with another important topic. Until then, stay engaged and stay informed.